Hi, this is Justin Buell, and this is the first video post for my blog, Radical Thought, which, if you haven't checked it out, please do so. We can use all the hits we can. Right now I want to talk about how the state essentially equals violence. It doesn't matter what form of state you have, whether that's a minarchist state, totalitarian state, a democratic state, it doesn't really matter. It always equals the use of or threat of violence against the individual, their liberty, and their property. And as a libertarian, the main goal is that the individual always be protected in those three main areas, that these rights that we have to our life, liberty, and property derive from the state of nature or God or, whatever you want to believe, that it's not simply given to you by the state or the majority, the collective. And no matter what form of state you set up, it's always backed up by the use of violence. If you just look at taxes, for example, everyone always says, well, you have a responsibility to pay your taxes, to help out the poor, help out society as a whole. And that may be true, but the act of taxation is always backed up by the threat that if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to prison. And if you refuse to go to prison, they have the right to shoot you, the police. Anybody that works for the state, they have the right to put you in that cage with other violent criminals, and if you refuse, you can be killed. And that's really what libertarians are against. It's not so much the welfare, giving things to poor people, and helping out the community. That's not the bad thing. It's the act of obtaining the property through the act of violence, or the threat of violence, which is coercion. I'll just use that word from now on instead of saying threat of violence. In any part of the law, if it's not negative law, by which I mean type of law that's in reaction to something. If you steal or you kill or, you harm someone, you can be taken to court and prosecuted for that. But the type of law that's called positive law, or arbitrary law set down by the government, legislators, supreme judiciary, executive orders, if you don't follow that law, the same thing happens. You get put in prison, or if you refuse, that's it. Or you get electrocuted with a taser, which is the police's favorite form of torture at the moment of civilians. And it also includes victimless crimes, which essentially all positive and arbitrary law deals with, is victimless crimes. Whether that's drugs, marijuana, which isn't a drug, by the way, seatbelts and helmet laws, prostitution, gambling, all that stuff is nonviolent crimes, which should be legal. Even in the minarchist position, it should be legal, but the state will use violence to make you follow those rules, whether you want to or not, and that's the inherent violence in the state. And it sort of reminds me of the Monty Python film, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where King Arthur goes into the village, and there's this guy, I forget his name in the movie, but he's always complaining about how, monarchy is ridiculous, how, you can't just claim to be the king and respect authority, all that sort of stuff. And finally, King Arthur gets fed up with it and just starts attacking him, and he's like, help, help, I'm being repressed, come see the violence inheriting the system. And it's true. The system that exists would not exist if it weren't for the use of violence or coercion. That's simply what constitutes the system. It's what constitutes the state. And without that violence, there would be no state. It would simply be a voluntary society in which people do whatever they want and follow the rules that are, the negative law. You have a right to defend your life and your liberty and your property in a legal manner, but you don't have the right to take it away, even if your purpose is, quote unquote, to defend liberty by taking it away, and that just doesn't make any sense. Now, there are no aspects of the state that don't require force. Everything that the state does is an initiation of aggression against their life, liberty, or property. Whether that's just as simple as the smallest tax, even a tiny 0.01% tax, is a claim on property that is inherently yours, and that is simply wrong. It's theft, and the state itself is a monopoly on the services of defense of your liberty, and the very act of monopoly is a negation of your liberty. They force you to take their services, they force you to pay for them, and they have the ability to commit crime and violence because of that monopoly on defense. They have the incentive then to do those things, to use that monopoly for their own favor because they don't have any competition. There's no real checks and balances. That, you know, the three branches, you know, they're always part of the same stem, the state. You know, it's not really competitive. It's not really, you know, there's no real checks and balances. It's a complete myth. Democracy presents the exact same problem too, because even though the majority controls the government, in theory anyways, their representative is supposed to act on their behalf, a majority acting violently towards a minority is no better than a minority acting violently towards a majority. And it all comes back to the individual rights. And the concept of collective rights, which liberalism, modern liberalism, is based on, simply it's not according to nature. It's not according to our nature as beings to operate in a collective manner. We have to operate as individuals. We think as individuals. We we work as individuals, and you know, we develop our relationships with each other. We have empathy, we have love, we have all these, you know, different things. We trade with each other for mutual benefit, but none of that constitutes a collective thought or a collective, you know, existence. You know, society is essentially a collection of individuals, but it always comes back to the individual. And monarchists face the problem, you know, constitutionalists, the classical liberal tradition, they face the problem as well with the mythical theory of social contract. All contracts, according to what I consider to be real libertarianism, and you know, I don't mean to offend anyone by that, it has to be explicitly signed or, you know, agreed to by the parties involved.